It's hard to believe that it's been almost 20 years since the release of Star Fox Command. I remember first reading about the game in Nintendo Power and being extremely excited for it. It was one of the first ever releases for a Nintendo game that I was able to follow along with and anticipate the release of. I had already played nearly all the other Star Fox games, excluding the original, which I barely even knew existed, and of course, Star Fox 2, which was never released. And at the time, the series was my all time favorite Nintendo franchise. That wasn't because I was in love with Star Fox Adventures or Star Fox Assault. No. It was Star Fox 64 that I loved. It was Star Fox 64 that I had played through and beaten over and over again. And to this day, it has remained my favorite game of all time. Adventures and Assault weren't bad, not exactly, but there was no denying that it lacked the spark that made me fall in love with the series to begin with. It was one of the first cases I can recall feeling like a franchise had lost its way, and I couldn't understand where it had gone wrong. In my mind, Star Fox was a series that was about the cool flying and the alternate routes in the story. Your decisions and ability mattered and would take you in all sorts of directions during the story. To me, that feeling of mystery, discovery, and accomplishment in Star Fox 64 was unmatched. Every time you figured out how to access a new level, whether it was saving Slippy in Sector X and moving on to Macbeth or hitting the warp gate in the asteroid belt to go to Katina, it always led to this feeling of discovering something new. I was incredibly disappointed with Star Fox Adventures. I saw it as a mediocre Zelda clone with Star Fox tacked on. I was also disappointed with Star Fox Assault, which I saw as a mediocre Halo-style shooter with 10 levels and no branching path structure. Before its release, I saw Star Fox Command as a return to form. I remember cracking open that issue of Nintendo Power and having the article covering the game assuring me that, one, you would never leave your R Wing, and two, that the story featured an extensive branching path system. Both of these confirmations made me feel, at the time, that Nintendo was massively course correcting on the franchise. The game would feature 9 endings and multiple paths throughout the game to reach those 9 endings. Both of these confirmations made me feel, at the time, that Nintendo was massively course correcting on the franchise. The game's 9 endings would give the game an insane replay value that hadn't been seen since Star Fox 64. And unlike Star Fox 64, where you only play as Fox, you got to play as several pilots, including, for the first time, characters like Cat Monroe and Leon in the single-player campaign. In a lot of ways, this game was everything I wanted in a Star Fox game. It felt like the strange, innovative new title in the franchise I had been craving. In my mind, seeing the images in that magazine and reading the blurbs on the game made me feel as if this was more in line with 64 than the other sequels had been. I genuinely thought, at the time, that this very well may be the game that put Star Fox back into the mainstream. The Wii was coming at the end of the year, and New Super Mario Bros. Had catapulted the DS into the mainstream success and relevancy. I was certain that Star Fox Command would be huge. It's one of those games I remember playing for the first time because I was just so excited for it. It meant a lot to me booting up the game, and I was disappointed. Star Fox Command is one of those games that is extraordinarily difficult to explain to people. The entire game is essentially one giant all-range mode, with strategy elements involving sending your pilots out to intercept the enemy. You have to balance your resources, such as fuel, missiles, and bombs, as you go up against waves and waves of enemies. On the first playthrough, you are railroaded onto one of the 9 routes and are told that, if you want a better ending, you have to play through the game over and over again. The endings, which remain the most iconic thing about the game today, are some of the most ridiculous things that ever come out of Star Fox. Even today, I mock the cursed ending for ruining the character of Crystal and wonder at the bizarre implications that Slippy the Frog not only got married and had children, he canonically had more children than he could count. This frog fucks. As a kid, Star Fox Command disappointed me in ways that I think an adult would have trouble understanding. For me, the first thing I remember being put off by was the voices. I had grown up loving the voice acting in the original Star Fox 64, and the fact that they replaced all of the actors with beeps and boops infuriated me. In hindsight, this actually made a lot of sense. It was not so different in style than Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, and in fact, the game's aesthetics seem primarily influenced by those games. The problem, however, is that I had never played Star Fox on the Super Nintendo and had no basis in reference as to what they were trying to do. I was confused and angry about something that at the end of the day didn't matter too much. And that feeling carried itself all the way through my 9 playthroughs of the game. Star Fox Command probably has the most amount of text and story than all of the Star Fox games. So it being fully voice acted would have been impractical. But I didn't know that. Not hearing Fox and Slippy talk after meeting up again on my first playthrough was a harrowing experience. Even at that stage early on, it felt to me there was something wrong with the game on a fundamental level. The characters were off, the story made no sense, and in a matter of hours, it was all over, leading to one of the most baffling endings in any video game I've ever seen. Here's the thing about Star Fox Command. It incorporates way too many characters and plot lines into its story. You can go on one path and fight the Anglar Empire and save the day, but in another, Falco goes off by himself, fights Aparoid Pigma again for some reason, and Fox wins the war completely off screen. I can't think of any other game that would do something like that. On one hand, this approach leads to the most interesting character bits we have ever seen from the franchise. The game goes quite a bit harder into Star Fox lore than any other game in the catalog, and we actually see established characters like Fox and Slippy getting married and having children in some endings. For the record, Peppy had already been married and had one daughter the entire time, which blew my mind growing up. And Falco, rather fittingly, grows into a grizzled old bachelor and is the old man on the team when Fox's son Marcus starts his own Star Fox team. It's this very strange double-edged sword. The story is not terribly interesting and does quite a lot of a character assassination in certain routes. On the other hand, doing numerous playthroughs gets you a lot of insight into character dynamics that we would never have gotten otherwise. For example, this game offers the most amount of insight we have ever gotten into Falco and Kat's relationship. The game digs very deep into Star Fox lore. Virtually every major character makes some kind of appearance, and on different routes, you end up confronting completely different enemies and having completely different people with you in the final stages. The game makes several strange callbacks to obscure Star Fox media, including officially licensed comics and unreleased games. And now, I suppose we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the gameplay. Star Fox Command is a spiritual successor to Star Fox 2, a game that never even came out. It's a strategy game in which you navigate around a map and enter real-time battles with all sorts of different enemies while you try to accomplish your objectives. Let's think about that for a second. Star Fox Command is a sequel to a game that nobody has ever played. When you think about it from that perspective, a lot of the things about it suddenly make sense. The writing, the tone, the style, a lot of it feels as if it's still rooted in the Super Nintendo era and not the far more popular 64 era. It's a game that is, by its design, paying homage to a game that not a single person in the community had any real experience with. As such, its gameplay, which to a lot of people felt strange and unintuitive, actually had a lot of roots in the series' history. This, I think, is very important to the game's legacy. Because the game expects you to know everything there is to know about Star Fox, even things that were being kept under lock and key at Nintendo, the game simply has no appeal to anyone but the most dedicated of fans. To a lot of players, Peppy having a daughter or Fox and Falco becoming F-Zero pilots feels like radical, out-of-nowhere left-field story beats that don't make a whole lot of sense, but in actuality, they are very strongly rooted in the history of the series. Unless you are the sort of player to get emotionally invested in characters like Pat, Bill, or Cat Monroe, and chances are you are not, unless you are the sort of person who played Star Fox 64 when you were very young, their role in the story would feel very forced and unnecessary. But as a fan, though, the mere fact that they tried to do something like this has its own interesting appeal. This is a game that attempted to tie together the plots of 3 completely different games from 3 completely different developers: Star Fox 64, Star Fox Adventures, and Star Fox Assault, molded into the style of Star Fox 2. By its very nature, it's an esoteric project. Everyone who loved any of those 3 games would be forced to contend with this title that really played nothing like any of them, although it tried very hard to use the characters in them to the best of its ability. It was a very hard sell to its target audience for this reason. Command, in a lot of ways, would have benefited from trying to be its own original thing rather than trying to please everyone in the fan base. I knew far too many people back in the day who bought this game and played it and grew frustrated with how it played nothing like Assault or 64. This is an interesting phenomenon because it demonstrates how video game continuity, that is, attempting to create endless sequels that intricately tie together, can seriously hold a game back. If Command had not been so intent on trying to create a coherent storyline from so many different games, it would not have antagonized so many different players. Nintendo is a company that is often criticized for not having large, sweeping storylines in their games, but this is a very good example of why they should not do that. Because of pre-existing game canon, they decided to acknowledge for this game it severely limited the potential of this game's original mechanics and ideas. Considering this game's scope, this could have been an incredible experience that hugely expanded the setting of Star Fox and fleshed out the characters outside of their basic appeal, but it's not. The decisions that the team made creatively contradict everything we know about the characters, and in many ways completely ruin their appeal because it is supposed to be in continuity with the older titles. By simply saying this was a completely new take on the series, such as with every other Mario game, they would have avoided this issue entirely. Star Fox Zero is a very good example of this. By completely ignoring the previous storyline, they were able to go back to basics, expand on the mechanics, and create far more intense combat encounters than were possible in Star Fox 64. Command, in comparison, refuses to use Andross as an antagonist at all because he's been dead since Star Fox 64. They respected established continuity instead of utilizing the iconic Star Fox antagonist that fans love to see. People like the idea of new antagonists taking center stage, but Andross is such an iconic part of the franchise that there truly is no replacing him. Although Command attempted at creating an entirely new antagonist, the Anglars, creatures that dwell beneath Venom's toxic sea, and at the end, the entire plot essentially revolves around the technology that Andross left behind anyway. In general, Star Fox Command is interesting because it bucks a lot of trends when it comes to Nintendo franchises. It does have a story. It has romance. It has original antagonists. It tries to do new and daring things with the characters and the gameplay. But doing something new doesn't necessarily make it better. Star Fox Command was released at the same year as New Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo DS. That game was far more popular, sold far more units, and established a new legacy of 2D Mario games. It was the first 2D Mario in 15 years, and in many ways completely reinvented the brand. But it did so by blending in old, iconic material seamlessly with new advances in technology. It's interesting to me how people have fabricated this idea that New Super Mario Bros. Failed or was unpopular when it very clearly established a much stronger legacy for itself than Star Fox Command did. To date, nothing in Star Fox Command has ever been referenced or brought up again by Nintendo. When it came time for Star Fox to return in the illustrious 2016 reboot, the series went back to basics with a far less convoluted plot and overall structure. The period of Star Fox's experimental phase had ended, and now, with the new one on Nintendo Switch 2 returning as a remake of Star Fox 64, seems to be gone for good. Command is a very interesting title because it is very possible that once Nintendo establishes the old successful Star Fox formula, that they very well may return to this strategy-based format. This style of gameplay has been present in the series since Star Fox 2, and although the formula has never been particularly successful, there is no denying that there is a ton of potential with the idea. In other words, in the future, it is very possible that Nintendo may decide to revisit this idea of the series becoming a strategy game. Star Fox Command may someday, like Air Ride before it, get a direct sequel out of nowhere that no one saw coming. And after decades of the franchise being unable to leave the shadow of Star Fox 64, that eventual sequel may end up becoming a huge hit. In conclusion, Star Fox Command was a very interesting experimental title. It tried very hard to blend together most of the franchise's characters into a convoluted plot that most fans don't look back on too fondly, but remains the most ambitious attempt at a grand story the franchise has ever attempted. Its unique story structure and multiple endings attempted to give the game a ton of replayability, although the game very quickly becomes very stale and repetitive. As someone who grew up disappointed with Star Fox Command, today I look back on it as a game that tried to do something different and failed. And I think it is far more important to do that than to endlessly recycle what worked in the past. Star Fox Command took the series in a bold new direction, and when that didn't quite work out, Nintendo next produced Star Fox 64 3D, and then Zero, which remains to this day the best entry in the franchise. It's interesting to note, although the narrative has always been that Star Fox has been a dead IP for decades, Nintendo has never truly given up on it. Today, we're seeing Star Fox in movies, in new games, and official merchandise. Considering how, in 2016, Miyamoto said he would be putting a lot of energy going forward into the franchise after the release of Star Fox Zero. A lot of people felt that he was full of hot air, but looking at the release schedule, Star Fox has never been healthier. We got Star Fox Zero, Star Fox Guard, Star Fox 2, Starlink featuring Star Fox in the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and finally Star Fox on Switch 2, all within a decade. Games take such a long time to produce now that people often don't realize when a franchise has made a full recovery. Star Fox Command had killed the Star Fox brand for about a decade, but the significantly more successful and popular Star Fox Zero brought it back in full force, and it hasn't gone anywhere since. With the new remake on the horizon, it is very clear that Nintendo has a lot of faith in the franchise going forward. I, for one, find it very hard to believe that they would put the character of Fox McCloud in a movie and then turn around and do nothing with him. But with Star Fox back in vogue, this means that Command is no longer the franchise killer that it was traditionally seen as. Going forward, it will just be seen as an odd spin-off title that really has nothing to do with the rest of the franchise. When it first released, it was billed as taking place in the same storyline as 64, featuring a lot of the same characters and continuing the overall plot. Now that the series has been formally rebooted, all of the weird story decisions and characterizations that made this game so underwhelming to people will quickly become an obscure part of Nintendo history. In many ways, they already have. There are certain things to appreciate about Star Fox Command, but every time I return to it, I am stunned at just how poorly conceived the game was at a conceptual level. Every time I return to the game, I find myself surprised at how repetitive it is, and it's rather telling this is the only Star Fox game ever that I have never beaten more than once, although I did get every single ending when I first played through it. Is it possible that Star Fox Command could have been a great game? I certainly think so. So many of this game's issues revolve around the script and characterization. If perhaps they had cut the root system to 3 clearly defined, higher quality paths instead of the 9 different schizophrenic ones and tightened the gameplay, we would have all looked back on the game much more fondly. As it stands, though, this is a game that has all the makings of being forgotten by history. If a new strategy game from this franchise does get made, I doubt it will follow the storyline of this one, making it completely pointless. So in conclusion, I feel as if Star Fox Command is doomed to irrelevancy. It isn't truly what killed the franchise. A long string of poor decisions in the 2000s led to that. It isn't a widely played game that the audience is particularly familiar with, and it certainly isn't so bad that any hardcore fan who tries to go through it would be put off by it. No, the only reason this game is so notorious is because fans really, truly, genuinely wanted it to be good. I know that very well because I was one of them.